Welcome and welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Alondra and today we are making a blackberry lime scone. So it is like midsummer in the Pacific Northwest and we are blessed to have blackberries growing in like every crack and corner of the city where I live. Dough is gonna come together really quickly. So the first thing I wanna do before we even get started is preheat our oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, so now that our oven is preheating, let's line a baking sheet with just a sheet of parchment paper. This recipe makes 8 like medium-sized scones, so I'm able to fit them all on one large cookie sheet. All right, so now that our oven is preheating and our cookie sheet is lined with parchment paper, let's go ahead and mix together our dry ingredients for this recipe. Starting in our mixing bowl, we have 2½ cups or 300 grams of all-purpose flour. To that, we're gonna add our ½ teaspoon of salt, our 2½ teaspoons of baking powder, and our 1/3 cup or 70 grams of granulated sugar, and then give that a whisk to combine. So we'll go ahead and set this to the side and come back to that in a little bit. So for this recipe, we're gonna use 1 whole lime, both zested and juiced, but we're gonna keep those components separate and use them in slightly different ways. So first we wanna zest our lime into one container and then juice it into another. Lime juice we'll go ahead and set to the side, but our lime zest we're gonna combine with our 5 ounces of heavy cream and our 1 whole egg. So we have our dry ingredients mixed in one bowl. We have our 1 cup of fresh blackberries, and then we have our egg and heavy cream mixture in a separate bowl. So what we are missing from our countertop ingredients is our butter. So similar to a biscuit dough, we're gonna get a ½ cup or 113 grams of cold butter. I have a pretty old pastry blender, so the first thing I'm gonna do is cut this butter into small cubes and then finish incorporating it into our flour mixture using my pastry blender. So the texture we're going for on this as we're cutting this butter into our flour mixture is kind of a coarse like cornmeal or a wet sand texture. So now that our butter is cut in, we're going to be combining our egg and heavy cream mixture in with our flour. This dough is gonna come together very quickly. We do not wanna overwork our flour so that we maintain a really tender scone on the other side of this process. We're gonna add all of our heavy cream and egg mixture and just combine them until there are almost no streaks of flour left. The dough is gonna be very thick, and so just before our flour and our egg mixture are totally combined, we're gonna dump in our 1 cup of fresh blackberries. Using a spatula or a large spoon, just very gently fold those blackberries in. Now, because they are so fresh, some of them are going to burst, and that's totally fine. But what we're looking for is just to very loosely incorporate the blackberries throughout the dough so that once they're baked, we end up with these really beautiful, like juicy ribbons of blackberry through our finished scone. All right, so now that those have come together, we need to turn this out onto a well-floured countertop. We're really trying to prevent this from sticking because we don't want to be pulling and twisting and like stretching the dough along the bottom. So I'm just continuing to flip it over and heavily flour both sides. Now you can use a rolling pin if you would like. I prefer just to use my hands. And so we're gonna press this dough out into about an 8 to 9 inch circle. I don't have a ruler in my kitchen, so I'm just eyeballing. We're gonna use a sharp knife to cut this into 8 equal sized pie wedges. And then let's go ahead and transfer these 8 pie wedges onto that parchment lined cookie sheet that we prepared earlier. So at this point, my oven is preheated and my scones are on their cookie sheet. The last thing that we need to do before these can go into the oven is to brush them with a simple egg wash. My favorite egg wash recipe is 1 egg yolk and 1 tablespoon of heavy cream. It makes it very easy to scale. The more pastries you're making, you can just double or triple those 2 ingredients. But we're gonna go ahead and using a pastry brush, brush this egg wash over the tops of our scones. Now, if some dribbles down the side, it's totally fine, but I try to do my best just to keep it on the top of the pastry. All right, so let's pop these into our preheated 400-degree oven for about 22 to 24 minutes until they reach a really beautiful golden color. Coming out of the oven, our scones look gorgeous, and we're gonna go ahead and let those cool on the pan for just a couple minutes, and then we'll transfer them over to a wire rack to let them cool completely before we drizzle any glaze on top. While those scones are cooling, let's quickly whisk together the last step of this recipe, and that is our lime glaze. So we're coming back to the juice of that 1 lime we juiced earlier. In our small bowl, let's start with our half a teaspoon of vanilla and maybe like 1 to 2 teaspoons of the lime juice just to help disperse that vanilla. I use vanilla paste, so I have to take this step now, otherwise I'll end up with like clumps of that vanilla paste in my icing. So to help prevent any lumps in our icing, I'm going to incorporate our half of a cup of powdered sugar in with what seems like very little liquid. So just that about a tablespoon's worth of liquid. Now it's gonna be thick, and this is not the final consistency that we're going for. Now, unfortunately, it's so hard to say like how much of your 1 lime are you going to use for this because it's a matter of preference. I'm just going for a really nice drizzle just to kind of top off the scones. But you can see I'm just adding a little bit of lime juice at a time until I get to what looks like a good consistency. So now that our scones are totally cool and we have our lime glaze ready to go, let's just go ahead and drizzle a little bit of this over each one of our scones. Now, I don't have any like real icing bags, but I've got Ziplocs. So what I like to do is I'll transfer all of this over into a small Ziploc bag and just cut the corners so I can use that to drizzle on my icing over top of all of my scones. Now our scones are done, and a good rule of thumb would be to let these set before you break into them. I am not a patient enough person to do so, so I will deal with the sticky fingers, but we are going to break into these now. My name is Alondra. Today was episode 5 in our Back to Basics series, where together we made a blackberry lime scone. If you enjoyed hanging out with me today or want more recipes like the one that we shared, please like and subscribe to With Love Alondra, and I will see you in the next one.